Let me take you back to the instant something snapped in my mind. The second I understood this wasn't a simple disagreement over land. This was a war, dressed up in polite language and corporate smiles. "Let's be reasonable, Mr. Hale," she said calmly, sliding a check across the table the way someone tips a bartender after good service. $100,000. Cash, for your cooperation. She didn't hesitate. No nerves. No tension. That's what stayed with me. She smiled. The kind of smile people rehearse alone in front of a mirror. Perfect teeth. Empty eyes. Like my existence itself was something she was generously allowing. I looked down at the check, then back at her, and one thought burned through my head. This woman truly thinks I can be bought. My name is Daniel Hale. I'm a disabled Navy veteran. I lost my right leg outside Kandahar. I came home with a pension, a prosthetic limb, and a lifetime's worth of memories I never asked for. I believed I'd paid enough to earn a quiet life. Instead, I found myself staring straight into the ugliest face of American money. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been released from the VA hospital after complications with my prosthetic. Nothing dramatic, just another reminder that war injuries don't end when the war does. I drove back to my property in northern Idaho, land my grandfather bought back in the 1930s. 40 acres wrapped around a spring-fed lake, so clear you could once count every stone resting at the bottom. Or at least, you could before everything changed. The first thing that hit me wasn't the noise. It was the smell. Diesel fumes. Fresh asphalt. Wet concrete baking in the sun. That smell that tells you something permanent has already happened, and nobody bothered to ask your permission. Then the sound came crashing in. Engines, power tools, jet skis tearing across water that had been silent for generations. By the time I reached my driveway, I counted more than 100 luxury cabins circling my lake like vultures. Perfect lines, identical decks, outdoor hot tubs steaming, like this was some billionaire's private playground. No notice, no warning, no consent. While I was relearning how to walk, someone decided my land was an obstacle. 2 days later, my water bill arrived. It used to be $40 a month. This one was $910. At first, I assumed it was a billing error. One of those mistakes you fight about while sitting on hold for hours. Then I checked the pump house. The well motor was running nonstop, screaming like it was trying to supply a town, because it was every single cabin, every shower, toilet, dishwasher, hot tub. All of it was connected directly to my well system. Not shared, not municipal. Mine. That's when I met Claire Whitmore. Claire's the CEO of Silver Pine Escapes, a luxury vacation rental company that markets curated wilderness experiences. Her family's been wealthy for so long they've forgotten the era when anyone ever told them no. She arrived in a spotless white SUV that had never touched dirt, wearing designer hiking boots so clean they looked insulted by gravel. She walked along my shoreline holding a stainless steel water bottle, casually sipping from it while her company drained my lake dry. There's a certain confidence people develop when they believe money makes them immune. I told her we needed to talk about the water. She told me her attorneys would handle it. 3 days later, a man wearing a suit worth more than my truck served me legal papers, accusing me of interfering with lawful commercial operations. According to their filing, I was the problem for restricting water access to a development that never had the right to touch it to begin with. The nerve of it was almost impressive. That's when I went to the county records office. I spent 3 days buried in dusty binders, property maps older than my father, water rights documents typed on actual typewriters. And what I found was simple, horrifying, and devastating for Claire Whitmore. There were no water easements, no shared rights, no commercial permits, nothing. The lake, the underground springs, the well, all that belonged exclusively to my property. Period. Silver Pine Escapes had built a multi-million-dollar resort on the assumption that a disabled veteran wouldn't notice or wouldn't push back. That's when Claire switched strategies. She showed up herself this time, parked in my driveway, sat at my kitchen table, slid that check toward me like she was tossing scraps to a stray animal. $100,000, she said. Sign a permanent access agreement, and we put this whole misunderstanding behind us. Misunderstanding. I asked her how much her cabins earned per night. She paused. Just a fraction of a second. Roughly $40,000 during peak season, she said. I pushed the check back across the table. That's not an offer, I told her. That's an insult. Her tone hardened instantly. She leaned back, folded her arms, and glanced at my prosthetic like it was a bargaining chip. Daniel, she said, you live on disability. Legal fights are expensive. This is more money than you're likely to ever see again. Be realistic. Be realistic. Words designed to shrink you, to remind you of your place, to make you feel small enough to accept crumbs. I handed the check back to her. I'll pass. Her smile disappeared. Her voice dropped low. You're making a mistake, she said. I can outlast you. Maybe she actually believed that. What she failed to understand is that 20 years in the Navy drills one very specific lesson into you. When someone with power underestimates you, they usually leave themselves wide open. 2 weeks later, I woke up in prison on my own land. Concrete barricades blocked my driveway. A brand new steel gate cut across the access road. Security guards stood there and informed me the road now belonged to Silver Pine Escapes. According to the map they were carrying, my property didn't even exist. That move wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. And control is where people like Claire always push too far. Because when you corner someone who has nothing left to lose, they stop playing defense. And that's where this story truly starts. Pause for a second, because this is a part most people overlook, and exactly where Claire believed she was smarter than everyone else. Standard procedure is clear. Any large-scale residential or commercial development relying on private water sources must secure 3 things before construction ever begins: documented water rights, commercial use permits, and a completed environmental impact review. Not afterward. Not, we'll sort out later. Before a single foundation is poured. From a legal standpoint, what Silver Pine Escapes did wasn't a gray area. It was a textbook case of build first, intimidate later development abuse. Developers like this gamble on imbalance. They assume the landowner won't understand paperwork, won't have the money to fight, or won't have emotional energy to resist. And this is where psychology comes into play. This is a trap. First comes normalization, using your resources without permission. Then minimization, calling it a misunderstanding. Then coercion, legal threats, blocked access, manufactured urgency. Finally, the insult dressed up as generosity. The low-ball check isn't about fairness. It's about dominance. Claire didn't just misread property law. She misjudged the man sitting across from her. She assumed disability meant weakness. She assumed isolation meant silence. And that assumption is what turns a civil dispute into a total collapse. Because once someone realizes a system is being weaponized against them, they stop negotiating and start documenting. And once that switch flips, nothing about the outcome is subtle. Once Claire blocked my access road, the gloves came off. I didn't yell. I didn't confront her people. I didn't try to force my way through the gate. That's what she expected, the angry, disabled vet snapping, giving her something to point at and say, "See? He's unstable." Instead, I did what I learned overseas whenever something felt wrong, but you couldn't yet see the whole picture. I slowed everything down. The first call I made was to Evan Brooks, a veterans' rights attorney out of Boise. Former Marine, the kind of guy who listens without interrupting and only asks questions that matter. By the time I finished explaining the water situation, the blocked access, the fake property maps, he went quiet for a long moment. "Daniel," he finally said, "they didn't just screw up, they crossed into criminal territory." That wasn't a shock. It was confirmation. We filed an emergency injunction that same afternoon. Illegal landlocking, interference with access, disability-based intimidation. The paperwork alone was enough to make a judge uncomfortable. While Evan handled the legal front, I started documenting everything. Photos of the gate, video of the guards, time-stamped recordings showing my water pressure dropping every time the cabins filled up for the weekend. That's when the county surveyor arrived. His name was Mark Denson, late 50s, sunburned neck. The kind of man who treats boundary lines like scripture. He spent the entire morning walking my land with GPS gear and old steel markers hammered into ground long before highways existed. Around noon, he motioned me over. "Daniel," he said, scratching his beard, "you're not going to like this. 12 cabins. Not one, not two, 12. Built 40 to 60 feet onto my property. Permanent structures, concrete foundations, decks, utilities. Silver Pine Escapes hadn't just taken my water, they'd taken my land." When Evan heard that, he laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was finished. "That's not zoning," he said. "That's trespass with intent. And it gets worse the longer they pretend it didn't happen." That night, my daughter Lena was home from college. We sat at the kitchen table sorting through old family boxes I'd inherited when my uncle passed. That's when she found the folder. "Dad," she said, "what's this?" Inside was a faded agreement dated 1989, a temporary water-sharing contract with a neighboring ranch, agricultural use only, 5-year term, expired in 1994, and behind it, printed emails, stapled, dated 3 years before Silver Pine Escapes ever broke ground. Emails between Claire Whitmore and her legal team. One line stopped me cold. "Client advised water agreement expired. Hale retains exclusive rights. Recommend securing easement prior to construction." Claire's response followed immediately. "Proceed as planned. We'll handle Hale later." Later, like I was a nuisance, a delay, a rounding error. That was the moment this stopped being about compensation. That was intent. After that, everything accelerated. I installed a master shutoff system at the wellhead, redundant valves, flow meters, security cameras with audio, every step documented, every component legal. If I was going to pull the lever, it had to be clean. At the same time, Evan coordinated with the State Water Authority. Turns out Silver Pine Escapes had never applied for commercial use permits. Their daily water draw exceeded legal limits by almost 10 times. Under state regulations, that alone triggered immediate suspension authority. So we chose the timing carefully. 4th of July weekend. Every cabin booked. Full occupancy. Peak pricing. Friday afternoon, 2 p.m. At 1:45, I was already there, sitting in a folding chair beside the main valve, wearing my old Navy dress uniform. Not for theatrics. Well, maybe a little. But mostly because I wanted the image to be honest. A disabled veteran standing up for what was his. By then, local media had picked up the story. A couple of cameras. A state water authority inspector. A sheriff's deputy who'd served 2 tours himself. At exactly 2 p.m., I turned the valve. The pressure drop was almost instant. Within minutes, toilets stopped flushing. Showers went cold. Hot tub shut down. By 2:20, the first furious family stormed into the rental office. By 2:40, it was complete chaos. Claire came charging out, screaming. She pointed at me like I'd burned her business to the ground. "This is illegal," she shouted. "This man is sabotaging our operation." I stood up slowly, leaned on my cane, and spoke toward the cameras. "No, ma'am. I'm exercising my property rights. The water you're using has always belonged to me." The inspector stepped forward. "Ms. Whitmore," she said, "you're being cited for unauthorized commercial water use and operating without permits. All rental operations are suspended effective immediately." Then the deputy handed her another set of papers. "Federal warrant," he said. "Bribery, intimidation, and disability discrimination." Claire didn't scream again. She went quiet. The crowd took over from there. Guests demanding refunds. Threats of lawsuits. Parents loading minivans. Furious their holiday weekend was ruined. By sunset, the resort was empty. Silver Pine Escapes had been shut down in a single afternoon. The fallout was devastating. Claire lost her company, her investors, her freedom. She later pleaded guilty to federal charges. The county official she tried to bribe lost his job and his pension. The settlement covered backwater usage, legal fees, and permanent recognition of my water rights. But the real resolution wasn't financial. 6 months later, the lake was clear again. Wildlife returned. The silence came back. That fall, Lena moved home, and together we started a small fishing guide service for veterans dealing with PTSD. No luxury cabins, no hot tubs, just quiet water and space to breathe. Claire believed power came from money. She learned too late that real power comes from understanding the rules and refusing to let someone break them simply because they assume you're too tired to notice. And this is where the story stops being just mine, because what happened on that lake isn't rare. It's usually quiet or messy, and buried under paperwork most people don't have the energy to fight. The lesson isn't stick it to the rich developer, though I won't pretend that part didn't feel good. The real lesson is about how power actually behaves when it thinks no one is watching. On paper, systems like HOAs, zoning boards, water authorities, and permitting offices exist to keep things fair. In reality, those systems are neutral tools, and neutral tools can be picked up by anyone. When someone with money realizes they can move faster than enforcement, faster than courts, faster than exhausted homeowners, they start treating rules like speed bumps instead of walls. From a legal standpoint, what saved me wasn't aggression. It was restraint. I didn't trespass. I didn't sabotage. I didn't threaten. I documented, verified, and waited until every move I made was painfully legal. That's what people underestimate. They think justice looks loud. Most of the time, it looks patient. But the psychology is the part that keeps repeating itself. Everywhere from HOAs to landlords to corporate developers, it's a trap built on assumptions. The assumption that disability means dependence, that isolation means ignorance, that someone living quietly must also be living weakly. Once people believe that about you, they stop hiding what they're doing. They put in emails. They say it out loud. They cut corners because they assume you'll never be a problem. And that's where they lose. Because the moment you stop trying to convince someone to respect you and start quietly preparing to enforce boundaries, the entire dynamic changes. Suddenly, the person who thought they held all the cards realizes they were playing a game where the rules still mattered. I get messages all the time from people dealing with HOA boards that reinterpret bylaws, landlords who forget to disclose easements, neighbors who treat shared resources like personal property. The pattern is always the same. First comes normalization, then minimization, then escalation, and finally, an offer that sounds generous but smells like surrender. That's the moment to pause, not to explode, not to fold, to step back and ask who actually owns what, who documented what, and who benefits if you give up. Because once you answer those questions, the fear starts to drain away. I didn't win because I was tougher. I won because I stayed boring. I followed process. I forced the system to do what it's supposed to do by making it look directly at the truth. And yes, there's satisfaction in seeing someone who treated you like an obstacle face consequences. But the real victory is quieter. It's waking up without anxiety. It's knowing the ground under your feet is yours. It's understanding that dignity doesn't come from permission. It comes from refusing to be erased. So I'll leave you with this, and I genuinely want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been in a situation where someone with authority, an HOA, a company, a landlord, a neighbor, counted on you being too tired, too confused, or too small to push back? Did you fight it? Did you walk away? Or are you still in it, trying to decide what to do next? Because stories like this don't end when the camera cuts. They're playing out in quiet neighborhoods, rural roads, and city apartments every single day. And sometimes all it takes to change the ending is one person deciding they're done being underestimated.